listening to the MUN 101 podcast with
Kyla,
Casey,
and Carol. Hi.
Welcome to the MUN 101 podcast. Do I have a motion to open debate?
Motion to open debate?
That is in order. All those in favor?
Aye.
Debate is now open.
Isn't it?
We survived.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, finals.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We're here.
We're done with them.
We're standing. Crawling.
Barely making it through American politics, though.
Laying down on couches for hours, more like it.
I'll say, Caroline and I both completed undergrad.
Whew!
We did it. Well,
Well-
stay tuned. Grades aren't in yet. Maybe we didn't do it, but maybe we did.
I have 2 more grades left.
Listen, our thesis professor told us that he would have grades in by the 20th, and that's our graduation day. So I can't wait for me
my
to
God.
be walking across the stage and, like, get a notification that I
From
failed my
Blackboard.
thesis class.
He would
would.
put grades in at graduation.
Summer coming around means that we have more time to work on this beautiful podcast and to work on all the fun things coming up, which we'll tell you more about at the end of this episode.
Yes.
So excited.
But for now, we need to give a shout out to MUN Memes 1 on Instagram.
Yes, we do.
We love partners within the community. We love shoutouts. And we just want to give a shout out to MUN Memes for having some really fantastic memes about Model UN. So just follow MUN Memes 1 on Instagram.
Or do what we do and create memes at all hours with all sorts of templates and send them to our group chat.
DM us any memes that you have.
Yeah.
We would love to see your memes.
And we'll feature them on our story if they're really good.
Yeah.
Also, check us out on r/mun on Reddit. We are under MUN 101 podcast, and we post some fire memes in there. So
Yeah,
if
there's
you
some really
are on
good
Reddit,
ones.
look us up. It's a fun time.
Also, a couple shout outs to 3 teams asked us to send so many stickers to them.
So many.
So shout outs to Elon, FIU, and UF, because I just want to say, we mailed, 70 stickers out?
We ordered 75. I took 2. Casey took 2.
Yeah.
I took 1.
Carol took 1. So we gave away all the rest of them. A lot of them going to teams, which is like really, really cool.
Yeah,
and
really
honestly, I can't emphasize how much that meant to us. Like, having support from other people really does mean a lot.
Yeah.
And this podcast is a lot of work. And it's, it's in its infant stages. So it's not like we're expecting, all these crazy returns and fans and everything. But it's really nice to see people appreciate what we do.
Yeah.
So thank you for
Yeah.
all the kind words. Because
Yeah.
lots of people were super, super, super sweet to us. And we really appreciate it.
If you did get some stickers and you are in the mood for a shout out, just take a picture of your stickers, on laptops and water bottles, just holding them wherever you want to put the stickers. Just take a pic of them and put them on your story, and we'll repost your story onto our story on
Yes.
101 Podcast to give you a little shout out and a thanks for all your support.
If you're feeling generous this holiday season.
I know a shout out on our page is worth
260 followers. That's some clout.
that
if
is
you ask
clout.
me.
We're at 264, I think, upon
Whoa.
265.
Even more clout.
I've been watching that like a crazy woman.
If you're here because we inexplicably followed you, welcome.
Yeah.
We're just trying to
It
raise our
happens.
engagement. Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you like the podcast.
Ever since we made the 101 podcast Instagram, my screen time for Instagram has like quadrupled.
Oh, absolutely. It's important.
266 we're at now.
Amazing.
Look at that.
Okay. Down to business.
Of
y'all.
course.
So, we're going to be talking about something that actually a lot of people have asked us about.
Yeah.
So, congrats to us for actually doing something that you guys wanted to hear.
Yay!
Not just us griping about nothing. So, we're going to be talking about high school conferences and running high school conferences, because a lot of you guys are high school students or college students that are running high school-based conferences.
Or even college students that are running college conferences and just want some advice, and maybe these tips
That
can be
too.
applicable.
They are
Yeah.
similar in a lot of ways. There are some differences which we'll talk about, but, conference planning as a whole is very similar for all
In depth.
levels, and it's a lot of work. So, for some context, I am the former Secretary General of the high school conference that we host at our university. Caroline has just recently been elected to succeed me in that effort, and she is the new Secretary General. She'll be doing that as a grad student at our university, which
You
is
can't
super
see
exciting.
me, but I'm putting up peace signs.
No, you're not.
Literally,
Oh, there they are.
she didn't.
It was in my head to do them. I stuck out my tongue instead. I'm sorry.
What other jobs did you have on Secretariat?
I was USGA of External Relations, talking to advisors and finances and whatnot.
Off of Secretariat, what did you do before then?
I was a rapporteur, and then I was a director of a room, not crisis.
We've changed that title to vice chair.
And then this coming year, I'm going to be director general for a high school conference, serving faithfully to dear Caroline in any capacity needed. And then the year before that, so what we've referenced before, I was USG of Crisis Committee, so under Secretary General of Crisis Committees. And we'll go into a little bit more about secretariat positions. And then before that, I was chair of DISEC, which is a GA committee, and then I was a rapporteur for DISEC.
We love that. And before I was SecGen, I was USG of GA committees, and before that, I was chair of UNODC? I think it was UNODC. Might not
Something
have been.
like that. I think so.
Probably was, which is also a GA committee. So we can talk a little bit about secretariat positions to give some context as to what we did. So Secretary General, you can think of it kind of as like a club president. They're the head of the conference. They manage everything. They oversee everything. There's a lot of miscellaneous things that fall to the Secretary General, and it's a lot of organizing and keeping track of everybody else. Because if you choose your secretariat correctly, they should all be doing their jobs pretty independently. I got really lucky with my secretariat, and for the most part, people all did their jobs independently. So, you just end up picking up the slack wherever it's needed. Casey, now that you're Director General, do you want to talk about what a Director General does?
Yeah, sure. So basically this year, we did a little bit of reshuffling of the Secretariat, and Caroline can speak to that a little bit more. But this year, Director General is taking on more of a logistics side. So not only will I be securing the keynote speaker for this illustrious event.
Major keynote
speaker.
It's going to be me. Stay tuned.
We'll see.
Representing 101 podcast, I'm going to be the keynote speaker. It's going to be great.
So basically, I am going to make the website look beautiful. I am going to make all the information necessary available to, advisors, delegates, staff through the website. That's something that I really want to see come to fruition this year, is a lot of streamlining. Helping out with, scheduling, logistics, whatever else Caroline tells me to do, I'll do it. That is what Director General is, kind of the right-hand man to Secretary General, and at least for our conference, very logistics heavy.
And then what I did as external relations was a lot of behind-the-scenes work, basically reaching out before the conference even happened to all the advisors, saying, hey, here's the conference, here's the dates, here's how much registration is, here's the form to fill out, all this stuff, contact me if you have questions. And of course, no one contacts you until about a month and a half before the conference starts, when you're already trying to solidify things, but that's beside the point. So I did a lot of emailing. I was on that email multiple times a day, every day.
That month before conference is really crunch time.
It was me on the train to intern.
Yeah.
Checking the email.
Carol and I took the same train, and it was just us griping back and forth about people not listening to us, mostly.
Yeah. Yep. Lots of invoices I had to send out. Lots of invoices to edit. Refunds. Basically, this job took me a full year to do, because as of a week ago, we had just finalized all the finances.
Oh,
all the refunds were sent out.
Yeah, we found out today.
All the refunds were sent out. All the schools had received their refunds. There were no complaints. All of our money was brought in. And I am just breathing a sigh of relief, because that means that everything is done.
In a lot of ways, external relations also acts as kind of a treasurer. They track our finances.
So do you want to talk about what you did as USG of GA committees?
Sure. Generally speaking, for USGs of committees, you kind of oversee the committees. It's kind of exactly what it sounds like. So you assist in picking the diocese, which we've talked about before, which is, your chair, your vice chair, your rapporteur. And if it's a crisis room, you choose the crisis director and the staffers. And you help them choose what topic they're going to be doing. And it's kind of up to the USG of how hands-on they want to be with that. We try to be somewhat of a helping hand, but not enforcing anything completely, because we like to have people do committees that they want to do, and they're in there the whole time that people are debating, so it's really important that they enjoy the topics as well. So under GA, the year that I did it, we did pretty much exclusively GA bodies. So, UNODC, DISEC, UNHRC, and all that sort of stuff. So they were very strict GA bodies.
United Nations.
Exactly.
Exclusive.
in the future, we're kind of looking, and I'm not trying to speak for Caroline and what she wants to do with the conference, but, trying to move away from that and get some more dynamic GA kinds in there, because there's a lot that you can do with the General Assembly Committee. It does not have to be a standing UN body by any means.
I think that's something, honestly, you did well as a SecGen.
Thanks.
I think we had really interesting topics this year.
They were interesting. I was happy with them this year. This year, we just tried to mix it up a little bit and get a little bit more dynamic, so it wasn't explicitly UN bodies. And I think that went really well, and I think Carol's going to expand upon that in her tenure with her USG of GA committees. Casey ended up being USG of Crisis Committees after I did USG of GA committees. And she did a really great job with that. So if you want to talk a little bit about the differences between the two.
For crisis committees. So something that you didn't mention that you had changed was, instead of saying, oh, we're going to have, 3 General Assembly committees, and we're going to say this one is going to be DISEC, this one is going to be UNODC, and assigning people to the specific committees already, we just said, hey, you're going to be a GA chair. You come up with the GA committee. And that can be a UN body, or it can be another kind of parliamentary, or not cabinet, but another
you could do
body.
A cabinet in it. We didn't.
That is
but
a
you
GA
could.
style. So during my, tenure as Crisis Committees USG, something Kyla and I had agreed upon was banishing the JCC from our conference.
Yeah.
Because, as of last year, we only had 3 crisis committees, and taking up 2 of those with the same topic of a JCC just didn't seem like something we wanted to do again, because there's so many more and interesting committees you can do that are crisis that don't have anything to do with each other, because I feel like JCC's kind of put a constraint on what themes you can do, especially when you're trying to make a committee for a high school level conference, because you don't want to go too crazy and have them feel like they can't research, or you want to stay in topics that are, appropriate for the high schoolers that you're going to be hosting at your conference. And then just to speak to the difference, I guess, is we're training people in different ways. So the USG of GA committees is making sure all of their staff knows GA procedure like the back of their hand, that being parliamentary procedure, basically helping them write the background guides and to that effect. And then crisis is helping train them in crisis procedure, which is very similar, but there are differences, and helping the back room a little bit more, I would pop in and, just to check in and help with ideas if anybody was stuck. But typically I just like to watch and make sure everything was flowing correctly weekend of the conference.
So I guess we can talk a little bit now about advice that we would have about hosting conferences and, the different steps that you need to take. So from the SecGen side.
What is the first thing you did as SecGen? I guess that's my question.
The first thing that I did as SecGen, and the first thing that Carol just completed doing, is choosing your senior sec. Senior secretariat is all those positions that we were talking about that we've all held. That is, in my opinion, the number one make or break thing that you can do to make your conference successful. My biggest advice is don't just choose your friends, choose people that are going to do a good job. It's so paramount that you have people that you can lean upon, especially as a SecGen, because you don't want to end up doing all of that work yourself. As someone who had to take over the positions of some people because they were not punctual and they didn't show up and they didn't pull their own weight, it was really, really, really difficult. I think Carol's secretariat is really, really fantastic. Look, and I think it's going to be great for you.
I agonized over that secretariat decision for days. Yeah. And I would ask Kylie, be like, do you think this person would be good in this position? And be like, they have these qualifications, but also do you think they're punctual and will they be able to do the job? And good Lord.
It's a lot. Do you want to talk a little bit, since you just did it, about the selection process and how how it went for you and what you did?
So basically, our high school conference, I feel like most high school conferences hosted by colleges are also staffed by their competitive team, which is the case for us because, that's who's interested in MUN. Sometimes we get a few people outside of it. We're going to really try to reach out to other people with this to staff it, just because I think it adds a lot of diversity and opinion. So basically what we did was I said, I'm sending out the senior sec application, and I think I sent it out the next day. And basically that was asking, standard application questions like, when did you have to solve a problem? Do you have any time commitments? And then what people's choices for positions were. And the responses were really, really good. Then I scheduled interviews with everyone, but I think that was a really, really important step because it also enabled me to see like how they talked and like if they were enthusiastic about ideas or if they had like a backbone, and if I kind of like pushed back against some of their ideas and they were like, no, well, this is why I think it's a good idea. I'm like, oh, okay, well, at least you're passionate about it. At least I know you have a backbone, because especially on senior sec, you have to have a backbone and you have to be assertive, but you also can't be mean about it. Because especially with advisors, you're going to have to talk to them and you're going to have to say, hey, you didn't pay by this point, or you didn't register by this point, and now you're going to have to pay more, or like we can't give you a refund for this because of X and X reason, and we've already bought supplies, and so many things that come up, and you can't just be a yes man, essentially.
A lot of what happens over the summer before we even get to diet selection is really in the sec gen, maybe a little DG. That's their portion. Just to kind of give a rough overview of timelines that people should be looking at.
Sure.
Just for your understanding, we have a spring conference, one that's later in the spring. So this is how we plan it out with a spring conference in mind.
Exactly. Some other advice that I would give from one sec gen to another, if you're listening.
Oh, cute.
Timelines are super, super, super important. Set deadlines sooner than you think that you need them, because you will need that extra time 100%. We started out with, I chose my senior sec by June. Caroline did it even faster than I did, which I think is an even better idea, because then people can get their ducks in a row over summer. Also, don't expect people to do work over the summer, because even if you're doing work and you expect other people to do work, they won't. And you just have to make sure that you're prepared for that. A really big part of what you need to get done happens in those crunch times during finals week, which is a really rough time to be working, but it's really, really vital, because that's when you touch base with your admin, which if you are hosting as a college or you're hosting as a high school is super important, because you need to make sure that you're on the same page with them and you guys get a date nailed down. Choosing your date is very important, because you need to make sure that you're going to have the facilities available and that there's no other major events happening at the school that conflict with that. Ours is in the spring, so we have to make sure spring breaks aren't in the way, Easter breaks aren't in the way, any other open houses or whatever is going on in the spring. That's vital.
And when you say final season, are you talking about final season in the fall before the spring conference, or final season at the end of the spring, basically a year out?
We're talking about a year out.
Yeah.
For us, that is in my opinion, I don't think that you can plan a conference in less than a year.
No.
I wish that we had more time to plan it. I wish we could start earlier, because frankly, the more time you have, the better the conference you're going to put on. So over that summer, it's, touching base with your senior sec, making sure that everybody's on the same page, going through your selection process. And I really think setting goals is important, and making sure that particularly the USGs of committees, the crisis and GAs, have definitive goals of what they want, and they have a vision of the types of committees that they want. Not specific topics, but how they want those committees to run, and the kind of people that they want in dioceses, and the kind of environment that they want to engender. Some conferences do themes. We are not one of those conferences, just because I think it's a little bit complicated. If you're a themed conference, unfortunately, I can't offer a lot of advice on that, because I think that makes things a little bit too complicated when you're trying to pick committees. But the biggest thing through summer is communication and trying to get your base infrastructure set up. If you can get your website done by the end of summer, incredible. That's amazing. We didn't.
The basis for your handbook done?
Oh my God, yes. The more information that you can have ready when you come back for fall, the better off you are. Because as soon as you come back in fall, you're starting your advertisement campaign and you're starting your diet selection. You guys can speak a little bit more to diet selection, because, we do that in a really cooperative manner, but it is, in the end, up to the USGs of committees, because it's their staff that they're working directly with. Everyone else on secretariat is kind of a step away from that. It's okay, so if you want to expand a little bit about dioceses and how you choose that.
Yeah, sure. So the way we do it here is we send out a Google form application, and I'm going to try to integrate that into the website this year. We'll see how that goes, but it shouldn't be too bad. So what we do is have the application, and we have people choose their first through third or whatever pick of role. So it could be, we kind of break it down by GA chair, crisis chair, every position you can have, and every different style you can do. And so we like to plot it out. Who's committed? Who do we know is going to show up? Who has the experience? Who's shown us in previous conferences that they've shown up done their work, submitted their work on time, done a really great job in the role, got good feedback. So that's how we place people in roles, and we try to do it based on what people want the most, but at the end of the day, we also prioritize who does a really great job, who do we know is going to come through on due dates and deadlines for submitting things like background guides and showing up to trainings and showing up to the conference itself and not having conflicts. So that's how we put it, and we kind of had this master spreadsheet in Google Sheets on our shared drive that we use for the conference. So that's basically how we do selection, and it's usually the USGA committees, the USGA of Crisis, and the SecGen all sitting down. Yeah,
Also,
and Director General.
Other pro tip. If you don't have a Google Drive or some sort of shared platform where everybody can see the same information, get one. It is literally the best thing you can ever do, because if you do it on Google Drive, you can do it on your phone, you can do it on any computer, you can see it, you can edit it, you can see who's made edits, which is key.
It is key.
You can leave comments. I adore Google
Caroline
Drive.
is losing her mind
Google
right now.
Drive
I'm losing my
is
mind.
amazing, and I'll give you a little bit of, insider baseball here about what we do at our conference. We have
baseball?
Yeah, inside baseball.
I
feel like I haven't heard that.
It's a sports thing. You wouldn't get it.
Inside
Oh,
baseball,
no.
baby.
I'm on the
I'm
Model UN
so
team. I
sports.
wouldn't get it.
We use what we call the operating system, which is basically a gigantic Google Sheets page
Like
that has
20
tabs in it, and we keep all of our base information in that. We do have a full drive that everybody has access to, meaning Secretariat has access to it. It has all of the senior sec applications, it has all of the staff applications, it has where we assign people, it has the committee breakdowns, it has all of our finances, it has the templates, it has everything on it. It keeps everybody on the same page, because if you have a question, instead of, badgering other people, you can just look at the drive, because it's all there so everybody can see it, which is super, super important. I was talking about communication earlier and how vital that is. Also, going back to what Casey was saying about dais selection, this is maybe a hot take, but I do think it's really important to take chances on people sometimes.
That's true.
Yeah,
because we have had some of our best staff members come out of nowhere with no prior, experience staffing, and they're incredible at it. And you have to give people the opportunity to grow. That doesn't mean that you need to bring on this random freshman you've never met and put them as chair of your advanced crisis committee. Maybe don't do that. But give people chances to prove themselves, and I guarantee some of them will surprise you very, very positively.
Also, when you said operating system before, that reminded me, freshman and sophomore year, when I was on Secretariat, you would overhear the Secretariat saying, put that in the operating system, or look at the operating system, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I had never seen the operating system, so I thought somebody had literally built a program.
Oh my god, me
with
too.
Some insane
Don't do it this year.
program.
This year, Casey and Caroline are building us an operating system.
I can't code.
I can't either.
Hey, look, I took AP Computer Science and I made a Mad Libs. I think I can throw together a website.
Hey, that's pretty good.
But when I found out it was just a Google Sheets page with
No, me
like
too.
20
so
tabs.
disappointing.
But at the same time, I was like, look at all this information.
It's good. A file system is important, and sharing systems are important. Okay, so we can talk a little bit about how we choose committees. Again, we kind of leave this up to the chairs in a really large part, because we want to make sure that everybody's content with what they're doing. And also, the crisis director really has to be on board, because they have to know the topic like the back of their hand.
Yeah.
Because they have to respond to everything.
Yeah, they have to answer questions. They have to act like characters from the time period. In
be
crisis
into it.
committees, the crisis director is a big
Like
sway
God.
point when it comes to choosing committees.
And I feel like there should be a disclaimer, because choosing committees is much more difficult than you think it is.
Oh
so
my
difficult.
If I
gosh.
could write like a title and a subheading people would see when this part starts, it would be like, choosing committees, subheading. It's harder than you think, exclamation point.
Yeah.
It so is.
Because there's committees you want to avoid with specific audiences. There are committees you don't want to do because they're trite.
A big thing to remember is you want to make sure there's actual debate and discussion in it.
Yes.
And I've mentioned this previously, of a topic will sound really cool, and then you realize, A, there's nothing you can research on it, so high schoolers will find it impossible. Or B, there's nothing to debate and discuss, so it's going to get really dry, it's going to get really boring, and there's no discourse within the room, and that just makes it boring for everyone.
Yeah, you gotta know your audience, and I think that that's a really big thing. You have to keep in mind who you're making the conference for. And I think I've never planned a conference as a high schooler, but I think it would be easier to plan for high schoolers as a high schooler because you know your capabilities. As a collegiate delegate, the collegiate circuit is very different from the high school circuit, so it's really hard to reflect that upon to high schoolers and their capabilities. So my biggest tips for that sort of thing, and I'm going to ask Casey and Carol to add on to this because they were a big part of this as well, but one, if you're looking at historical committees, don't choose anything that is trite because people will have already done it. Also, don't choose anything that's too obscure because it's so frustrating to research things that don't have any content. And also, like, if they're a full-time high school student, they have a lot going on. And the likelihood that they're going to devote the amount of time necessary to research an obscure topic is very low, and it's going to ruin debate. If you're choosing a modern topic, don't choose something that is, racially charged or
a historical topic
or religiously
charged.
Anything that could veer on controversial or offending literally anyone in that room.
Yeah, it's not worth it because there are so many political crises that are happening in modern day that you can do that have nothing to do with that.
Exactly.
That are super, super interesting. Like, for instance, this past conference we did the Brazilian Lava political corruption crisis. And that was super interesting because it was just obscure enough to where not everybody knows it, but there's plenty of information. You got to toe that line. And for future committees, same sort of thing. You got to be really careful. Put constraints in the committee. Give specific outlines of what you want from people.
It has to be a fantastic background guide.
Like, I wouldn't even take the risk on a future committee for a high school conference unless your staff is willing to put in several hours into making that amazing background guide.
That's going to be their only source.
Yeah, you have to invent it, basically. Mm-hmm. And unless you're willing to invent a whole universe for your committee, maybe don't do it.
Yeah. Also, this is kind of controversial, I don't know, but I'm not a super fan of fantasy committees. Fantasy in the sense of not like, oh, King Arthur and Knights of the Round Table. I think that's cool, but I think anything that is based in like sci-fi movies, sci-fi
based
TV,
in canon?
Or anything based in canon, whether it be sci-fi or just based off of
books,
a
movies,
book, TV show, movies. It's very hard to get that many people who are good at that topic in the room who feel comfortable being in that world. Because if you don't know that like the back of your hand and you're not an insane fan, you're putting yourself at such a severe disadvantage, and this can bleed over even into the collegiate circuit.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
feel so uncomfortable.
So many Star Wars committees.
Yeah.
Where,
so many.
If you're not a super Star Wars fan, and I love Star Wars movies, but I would never go in a Star Wars committee because there are people out there that know all the planets and all the governments of the planets and all of the minor characters and their backstories, and that's just crazy.
And it puts your staff at a disadvantage too, especially if you're doing a crisis committee
Yeah.
and someone goes off canon. Like, God forbid one of your staff goes off canon in a response to a delegate, and the delegate calls them out and says, this isn't in canon. Then what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, you can't just say, oh, we're breaking canon for this committee, because then nothing in canon sticks.
Those are really difficult to toe the line of, and again, it kind of goes in hand with the futuristic committees. I would not suggest doing those unless you have a staff that is 110% committed to putting in large amounts of manpower.
Just so
It's
much work.
It's a lot of work, and it can be done. And if it's a passion project for someone, let them do it, because there are committees like the one that Casey was talking about that are incredible. And there's nothing more exciting and satisfying than seeing a committee go off and be perfect. And that's great. But just know those are a lot harder to do than modern and historical committees.
Also, with committee topics, I would also say if you're doing a war committee, something that has gone over so well with the delegates and has made everyone's life so much easier is maps. Make such detailed maps. Make maps so detailed you think there's no way they would ever need this amount of detail, and then they will need that amount of detail.
And
because they won't know where to move troops, they won't know what troops they're moving.
Handouts have been a very important part of improving, especially our crisis side. So this is a little tip coming from things we did in crisis this year. One of our crisis directors, Efrain, did a fantastic job. He hand drew maps. I was watching him in econ on paint. Drawing maps and districts within every country in Europe and making everything really kind of like a big game board for people to move their troops around to. He had color handouts for all of the delegates printed, multiple pages of them, and then
It's dedication.
Yeah, something that I did that I think I want to improve even more onto the website is I gave out handouts, kind of like a crash course in crisis, and that's something I think we should talk about is depending in the region you're providing this conference for, there can be a very severe difference between GA abilities and crisis abilities, and that's not saying don't have crisis committees, because I think a lot of delegates come in, don't really know what they're doing, but have a really good educational experience, and that's something
fun.
Yeah, that's something we really push for is have a great time. You're here to learn and have fun, especially within crisis committees.
For sure.
But I think I want to improve from the handout so they're not getting aware of stuff as they're sitting down. And even I popped into a few crisis rooms to give a little bit of a crash course in what they could do further in the room because we were kind of struggling with notes. But I want to kind of transfer all those materials onto the website so delegates have a space where they can go in and see the materials and prep and understand before they walk in the room so they're even better year after year.
Yeah, I think that with that we can kind of talk about background guides and, stuff that you give to delegates and also advisors. With background guides, like we were saying, you need to be super, super detailed and make sure that you explain in that background guide what you want out of committee. Give them a purpose. Give them questions to consider. Give them a situation that they need to solve, because there are too many background guides out there where they just give an overview of the situation, but they don't have any calls to action. They don't have any leading points for research, which is especially important in high school because you need to orient them. Otherwise, debate is going to go off the rails and nowhere near where you want it to be. And that goes for crisis and GA. You need to orient them. Also, if it is a crisis committee and they're going to be war games, explain what war games are and how they're going to work. Make sure that people are prepared. If you want crisis notes to go in a certain way, give an example crisis note that they can look at. Give them as many resources as you possibly can, and it will make your life easier because you're going to have to answer a lot less questions on the fly, and debate will just start and go seamlessly and beautifully. It's a lot of work. Again, to make a really successful conference, you're going to have to put in the effort. But again, it kind of becomes like your child and you like to watch it grow and then you see it go off and people love it and you're very proud of the child that you created with your 7 other secretariat members.
Answer questions you don't even think need to be answered.
Yeah.
Like, what's the difference, or is there a difference between crisis and GA?
Handouts are really key in helping the success of the delegates because, like Casey was saying, in the long run, this is supposed to be an educational and entertaining thing for them. It shouldn't be stressful. They should enjoy it just as much as you guys should enjoy it, which is why the prep work is so important. So your weekend of, it's an enjoyable time and not a big stress fest.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be stress. There's always stress. I mean,
Of course.
I think if you had a conference without stress, it would probably be a bad thing. Because then maybe you're not...
All the problems come up and you just go, okay.
All right.
Leave it.
Whatever.
Or you think everything's running well because you're not stressed at all, and it's actually a massive train wreck.
Senior sec never leaves the senior sec room, so we all just sit in there. Everything's on fire.
Yes.
But we have no idea.
Rome is burning.
At our conference, we have, rooms for advisors, rooms, of course, committee rooms, senior sec room, just for senior sec, so we can debrief, we can chat, We have the window papered over. It's our little private hovel. I think we should have a conference where we just never leave it and we never walk around and we never talk to advisors.
That's good.
That would go so well.
I think we have a conference where
this is all sarcasm.
Play the Parks and Rec episode, which we, wink wink, love and totally haven't seen 40,000 times.
My mouth is agape right now.
The Parks and Rec MUN episode is... It's not even the type of MUN that we do.
It's not even the type of MUN that anyone does.
Everyone pause for a hot take. I love Parks and Rec.
Yes.
I hate that episode.
It's not that good.
It's not.
That episode isn't that good. And if anybody that is on old senior secs for our conference hears that, they might come to our house and attack us. Because this is a big cultural thing within our conference historically, but we ended it this year.
We put the kibosh on it.
The amount of pressure that my laptop was hooked up to the projector for the majority of the weekend, or at least for the first day.
The pressure my laptop was under.
The amount of pressure I was under to pull up the Parks and Rec MUN episode,
but we didn't do it.
We didn't do it.
We didn't do it. As senior sec, it gets super difficult, whether it's the staff that's working under you or the staff that is working alongside you. One, make sure that your staff, whether it's senior sec or dias, knows what is expected of them. At the beginning, make deadlines clear, make duties clear. Calendars.
So many calendars.
So then, if the deadline comes and they don't have it done, you have receipts. Because I promise you that someone is going to try and make you look dumb. And be like, I didn't know, or it's like, it's not there, I didn't tell you. It, like, yes, you did. It's in the emails. It's in the shared calendar. It's wherever. Make sure it's clear. Potentially, and this is, not in everybody's style, make people sign a commitment contract. I recognize what I'm signing on to. I know what I'm doing. You can't contractually obligate anybody to stick around.
Let's take them to court.
But at least make sure that they're aware of what they're getting themselves into, because the amount of people that joined in the fall and then springtime comes around and it's a week before the conference and they're like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
It's like the meme where that kid is like piecing out and fading into the background.
I was thinking Homer Simpson absorbing himself into the bush.
No, I was thinking the little girl staring at the burning house.
Well, staring at
low-key.
the camera
away from the burning house.
Yeah. Something about winter break really does it to people.
Ooh, really? Winter break really do it.
It snipes your staff. It will. Your staff will cut by several people.
Oh, yeah.
But it's okay.
Yeah.
Don't panic, because it happens to everybody.
And just talking to smaller schools as well, since we do have a smaller community to pull from, sometimes it gets difficult when someone isn't meeting deadlines and you don't really have the staff to cut them or actually have repercussions. I think it's better to try and be really forceful about, deadlines being met, and then if those fall through, trying to make it up with that person. There are certain situations where it's better just to cut that person and work with the staff that's dedicated, because you can often go, if you have a 3 dais, you can often go with just 2 people on the dais, especially in GA committees.
We had a staff like that. I will just say Mac and Elena really, really killed it for us this year. They had their 3rd staff member drop off, and they stepped up and did a fantastic job. And that is 100% possible in any committee situation. Devin and I, when I chaired my first year, we were a 2-person dais, and it was fine. It's completely possible. And if you have staff drop off, it will work out. Especially, and we get worried about it because we are sometimes very low on crisis staffers. And with crisis rooms, you have 30 delegates in there sometimes, and you're like, we don't have enough people to process these notes. Keep in mind, most of the people in there aren't going to be writing notes like madmen.
Yeah, especially high schoolers.
It's going to be a slower pace, and that's okay. And also, as much as you want to hold strict deadlines, but set them early. So then you know in your head, hey, I don't actually need this to be done for another 2 weeks. So if someone comes to you and is like, it's not done, say, okay, you have another week to do it. Get it to me. You look very kind, and then they get the job done. Everybody wins.
Another thing I think we're going to try to do this year, I was talking to some of our USGs, is instead of having one large due date, say, the background guide is due on X date. Say, this part of the guide is due on this date, this part of the guide is due on this date, and this part of the guide, and then the finalized edited guide is due on this date. Because I think people, and I do it myself sometimes with essays, you look at a project and you just push it off until that date creeps right up onto you, and the day or two before you start working on it. And so if we can do that with smaller chunks so people don't feel, some people said they were feeling overwhelmed, but in reality, they were given the date like 3 months ahead of time to do it. But it's because you push it off and the date doesn't seem like it's approaching that you wait until the last few days. So if instead of, that one big thing, you working on it in a night or two, just having smaller chunks, you work on a night or two.
I love the chunks idea, because in the past, the way that we did it under my year, we did it as there was a first draft due and then a final draft due. And I agree that you need to break it down more than that. So it also allows you better editing capabilities. You can really break down those sections and look at them and make sure that they're what you want, and also make sure that everybody has sort of a uniform standard of what the guides are going to look like. Also, trying to get everything under the same format and making everything look nice and uniform is its own marathon in itself. It's a whole task.
What was the thing that so with all the guides, we like to do a run-through training with the dais and the guide to make sure the topic is fun and the dais is decent. And there was one instance in one of the guides, I think it was the Napoleon's 100 Days, where they called, it was like pigeons instead of
pheasants instead of peasants.
That's right.
And it was in one of the like main paragraphs, and it says, during this time, the peasants and the poorer populations brought much of the abandoned land, but it said pheasants and poorer populations bought the land, but pheasants can't buy land.
Wait a
Can't
second.
they?
Pheasants can't buy land.
So that was a great thing for me to receive.
It's kind of
So we've unloaded a lot of information.
Yes.
It's been a while.
We've been talking for a long time. So I'm going to take this time to say we're going to wrap this up. But
But,
we aren't quite done.
asterisk. There's an asterisk.
There's an asterisk here. Because more information will be coming your way in the way of a MUN 01 website. I'm so excited about this.
No one asked for it, but we're doing it anyway.
We're really, really excited about this. I'm not to toot my own horn because I made the website.
No,
but
it's stunning.
it
Toot
looks
your own horn.
really, really nice.
It does. It
And
looks
the
really
WordPress
interface
who?
is fantastic. And we have it set up so there will be lots of different content going on there, from episode summaries of our podcast to opinion pieces by us to team spotlights, delegate spotlights, informational stuff, training materials, how to host conferences, conference reviews, club management, everything under the sun MUN related. We are going to be posting about it on there. We're very, very excited about this. Look for it in the coming weeks. We'll be putting it on our social media whenever it does end up launching. We haven't settled on an exact date yet because we're still trying to build content. But we're really, really excited about this, and we hope that it is everything that you hope for it to be. So with that in mind, please DM us if you have anything that you would like to see as far as content on the website.
If you want your team spotlighted, if you want a delegate spotlight.
Yeah, if you'd like to hit us up with some info about a really great delegate on your team that you'd like to see spotlighted, please do. Kind of an aside, but also relevant. We're hoping to do an episode coming up about crisis arcs. Please send us your best crisis arcs. We're going to be asking for them on social media, but if you're listening to this, and Casey hasn't edited it out because I had this timeline wrong, send us your best crisis arcs or any great ones that you've heard about, because we'd love to feature them on the podcast.
It can be yours, it can be your teammates, it can be another delegate's.
Just make sure you send us, the conference it was at, the committee's name, the position they had, even, in addition to that, when the conference was, and then a pretty good synopsis. It doesn't need to be every little thing they did, but, a paragraph that would be substantial and give people enough of an idea about what the arc is. Nothing too crazy, but when we read it on air, we don't want whoever's arc it is or you to think, oh, crap, I left this out, or people don't really get a good idea of what the
that
arc
we
was.
didn't do it justice. So give us good info. We would love to have y'all featured. I know how exciting it would be for me if someone talked about my arc anywhere.
A podcast with maybe a listener.
No, stop selling us short on the
least,
podcast.
We have at least 0.5 of a listener.
Just big information. We unlocked iTunes analytics. Ignore Caroline.
We did it! Thank you to everybody who listened on iTunes because we berated you on our Snapchat stories.
all the pessimism about this podcast isn't true. Our listeners were doing very well and we're growing quickly on Instagram, iTunes, and Spotify.
Share us with your friends. Share us with your friends. Share us with your friends.
And your teams.
And your teams.
Who are probably your
all
friends.
your Molly UN friends. Please. We would like to have more listeners.
So, with that, do I have a motion to close debate?
Motion to close debate.
That is in order. All those in favor?
Aye.
Debate is now closed.
Hey.
Point of inquiry. What are your social medias?
You can follow us on Twitter at MUN01 Podcast, and you can also email us at mun01.business@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of the MUN01 Podcast. We hope to have you back soon.